So, welcome everyone to Breathe, Survive, Recover, Thrive, and Repeat. This will be Daniel Smith will be speaking, and we're excited to listen to this great information. Up top, you will see if you're having any technical difficulty, please email that email address, and they will get you correct straight away. And if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please put it in the chat box, and hopefully we'll be able to address it in the end. So take it away, Daniel.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I really enjoyed your presentation earlier, and I have enjoyed Denise's interpretation. Just her facial expressions are worth coming to the conference. But I've heard so many good things, and I'm glad to be here. Glad to be here. I wanted to say good evening, New York, just to paraphrase Robin Williams. I'm going to see if I can share my screen. And I don't, hang on one second. I will set that up. No, maybe not. I'm beginning. There we go. I think we are on then. Good evening. My name is Dan Smith, and I was a poet who was born and only in New York. But I'd like to thank everybody at the New York Council and everyone who is here tonight, staying on into the evening to listen to me talk about dragons pursuing people in recovery, which is the image from the 16th century that's on the title slide. The focus this evening is talking about recovery being much more than abstinence. And the title is something that's pretty near and dear to my heart, but it's not as important as the content, which is down in the lower right-hand corner. We're going to look at some breath work, and we're going to look at some supercilious statistics on contemporary meditative practice and some atypical CAM interventions, complementary alternative medical interventions that you can use. And I would like to mention that there is a PDF of these interventions and some important slides that is available from the New York Council, as well as a copy of the slides. Also, you see on this title slide and at the very end, if we make it to the last slide, my email address and cell phone number, which I certainly encourage you to shout out for any questions. The slide package will include a lot more detail. I don't have any financial disclosures to make except to say thank you to the New York Council for their generous stipend for having me speak tonight. I am a counselor. I'm in the trenches. I'm not a researcher. I'm a clinician. But I've been doing it a long time, 27 years as the director of the Bet No More gambling programs here in the St. Louis, Missouri area. And I've practiced working with gamblers and their family members in 4 different settings of inpatient, outpatient, intensive outpatient. And I've been doing telehealth since 2010. I also have had a contemplative psychotherapy practice in St. Louis for about 30 years, practicing meditation for about 33 years since 1987 when I entered recovery. And I've a board-approved clinical consultant since 1988, if that's really, or excuse me, 1998, if that's important. Recently, I have signed on with Rise and Hope Medical Center in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I am the online coordinator for gambling services there. I live in the land of the Osage and Kickapoo, and I was born and raised in the land of the Salamanca in Ishiway in Cattaraugus County. The image of the pearl diver Tamatori being pursued by a dragon is well known in Japanese literature, but that's really not the chorus tonight. But I think it's an apt image for what goes on when we try to deal with the noise of recovery. And this presentation is a result of 20 years of listening intently to my clients and probably a smattering of neurochemicals. Most of that seems to be the stuff of myth for my clients as well as for myself. But I do know just enough of it to be dangerous, and there'll be enough statistics in there for those of you who want some tables. Today, we'll try to explore how alternative treatment interventions above and beyond the normal, typical, and I do mean cognitive behavioral therapy, can help treat addiction, specifically gambling, and actually nurture balanced recovery rather than simple abstinence. I hope to convince you that breath work, meditation, atypical, complementary, and alternative medication off the mainstream can best treat trauma survival and resolution and can best provide some components that lead to happiness. And that, of course, all of which affects the outcome. So we're talking about a paradigm shift here. And a paradigm is a way of looking at the world. And there are four elements of a paradigm that usually are pretty rigid, preconceived, a priori type of assumptions. If all we have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. There are certain protocols and strategies. Sometimes we call those the 12 core competencies of counseling. But there might be strategies in treatment planning as well as delivery of that. And sometimes our paradigm has a plus or a minus response. It's either positive or a negative outcome. And how do we measure that outcome? What is that outcome? What makes for a positive outcome? Is it abstinence? Harm reduction and abstinence are two sides of the same coin. How do we get the addict to engage in his or her life again? And of course, existing paradigms as well as new paradigms have goals. I like to teach a goal-setting model of Spiro. Goals have to be specific, performance-oriented. The person making the goal needs to be involved and interested in the goal. That's the I part. The R stands for realistic, and the O is for observable, obtainable. So our aspirations sometimes do not match our interventions. And what I would suggest is that some of these dusty presentations of the previous slides over the past 20 years have come to be a pretty decent large struggle for me to change my paradigm. On the right-hand side of the slide, you'll see the breath of fresh air that comes in when you open the window and look out to sea. And be receptive and open and willing and vulnerable. And look at treatment as fun, something we need to do together. I would suggest that there are many paradigms, and in the last half of the 20th century, and I know I'm dating myself here, there are several theories of addiction and definitions of addictions that I talk about with my clients. And I have an active caseload right now of about 11 people in the St. Louis area that could come if we were meeting in person, but we're not. I have clients from Kansas City and across the state. I have clients in Nevada and other states as well. And I've been providing Zoom group therapy off and on since 2010, but in the last 2 years of the pandemic. The pandemic itself is a paradigm shift, and coming out of the pandemic is a paradigm shift. But these shifting paradigms in the 20th century regarding addiction, I'm going to start with Smith's theories of addiction because, after all, it is my presentation, right? But we're going to briefly look at Dewey Jacobs' attributional theory of how we get to addiction as a way to avoid a chronic arousal state. And the feminist writer Ann Wilson Schaaf, her deep process work. She is the author of When Society Becomes an Addict, and one of my favorites, Codependency, Misunderstood, Mistreated. We're also going to mention the wonderful book, The Paradigm Conspiracy by Breton and Largent. And then I want to bash a few cognitive behavioral interventions and also the emphasis on neuropsychiatric insights. I'm going to skip around just a little bit here. There's more detail in the handouts on this, but I teach my clients 6 different theories and ways of how we got here, how we understand addiction, especially in gambling. The moral model, which we can fix people by sending them to jail, which doesn't work, by the way, or giving them good old-time religion, which, if it works, doesn't last and doesn't work for a long time. But the moral model's been with us for about 4,000 years. The medical disease model has been with us equally as long, but we took a hiatus in the 1600s when the Victorians in England and the Puritans in America hijacked the idea and decided addiction was not a medical problem. It had been up to that point. But no, addicts and alcoholics and gamblers, especially if you look at Bo Bernhardt's work on some of the sermons of 17th and 18th century American preachers, you can see that gambling is an evil and treated by the vice squad, still prosecuted by the vice squad. We've got other theories in the 20th century. Before World War II, most of the medications in our country came from plants. After World War II, most of the medications came from the chemical plant. They were synthetic. But there is some truth to the self-medicating model of addiction. I, for one, happen to like that. I'm a little bit anxious. I haven't had any caffeine today, and I can talk for about 6 or 7 hours on this subject, probably nonstop. You won't want to wait that long. But my hyperactivity was medicated with alcohol from a very, very early age. In the 60s, if anyone remembers them, that was a 10-year blackout, by the way, for a lot of people, myself included. It seems that we blamed addiction on a lot of other things. And in the 70s, we have the model that we're stuck with right now, which is the biopsychosocial model, proposed by a number of people, popularized by Terry Gorski and others, that says we have a brain disorder that affects our thinking and feeling, and that addiction is acted out in our social relationships. Some of us might also add the word spiritual to the end of that, a biopsychosocial spiritual problem. John Bradshaw comes along in the 1980s and popularizes the shame model, which basically is the moral model in sheep's clothing. But there is something to that. You know, it's not that we got potty trained with the wrong color M&Ms, or it's not that they used the wrong side to breastfeed us. You know, shame is real. And there's toxic shame and there's healthy shame. So enough about those. Jacobs' attributional theory, and I'm just going to mention this briefly. The late Dr. Duran Jacobs of the Loma Linda, California Medical School of Psychiatry, says that addiction diverts our attention from a chronically aversive arousal state. It reduces self-criticism and dysphoria, and it facilitates an altered state of consciousness. Now, I like that. And Dewey and I had many conversations about what happens once we come to this definition and we start talking about neurochemistry. We need to treat ADD. We need to treat ADHD. We need to treat depression. We need to treat all the precursors of a gambling disorder. Actually, calling it a disorder is sort of sanitizing it a little bit. I don't like the Harvard term there, but it is what it is, and that's what we call it. This is the relief that the addict seeks. Now, let me bash a little bit of cognitive behavioral interventions. There are so many sources here that I don't even begin to cite them. We've had everything from David Burns and, the Sting, and that's the Feeling Good handbook, to all the works by NIDA, great work on cue extinction and triggers and how to treat, and CBT, how to treat addicts and treatment from NIDA. Again, most of the research that's current are really limited by the size of the sample and by the fact that it is in a treatment setting. Very few studies have been done on therapeutic communities because there's very few therapeutic communities left, and very few studies have really looked at recovery outside treatment settings. A few of them have. One of them is Black and Allen in the Journal of Gambling Studies in 2021. It's a recent study that actually explores the predictors of success comparing older and younger adults who are problem gamblers, who meet the diagnostic criteria. And this is in a non-treatment setting. The other very wonderful study in a non-treatment setting was done by Richard Rosenthal and Timothy Fong at the 50th anniversary of the founding of Gamblers Anonymous some years ago. And I've never seen anything that's ever been published from that study, although I'm looking forward to it. My question to you as a clinician is that, do you measure cognitive function of your clients? Do you know how to do that? What are you measuring when you're measuring cognitive functioning? We know a lot about cognitive restructuring, but maybe it might be just easier to talk about habit energies. What are our habitual energies? What are the deepened neural pathways in the brain that cause us to keep going back in spite of adverse circumstances? Cognitive behavioral therapy just continues being stuck in the old control paradigm. And in the control paradigm of addiction, and the reference here is the Paradigm Conspiracy by Brett and Lars Gent. The paradigm that creates addiction can't heal it. It sure sounds like Einstein again. You can't solve a problem with the same kind of thinking that created it. The recommendation that they make is very, very important. I've spoken at length in other venues about the spiritual bankruptcy of the addict, and I'm asked all the time, why won't religion or jail or a particular pill or a medication fix the spiritual dilemma of the addict, which is to find meaning and purpose in life outside of the addiction? Gamblers in particular are on a quest, a spiritual quest, a quest for spiritual meaning. I would refer you to my dear friend and colleague, Christopher Anderson, who has devoted most of the last 20 years of his work to exploring this topic. And as we face pandemics, the specter of war, and nuclear destruction, I'm wondering if the addict's microcosm portends the planet's eventual outcome. Is recovery possible? I think so. I suggest yes, it is. I insist it is, because we're not Homer Simpson. Homer's got a problem here. This may be the simple part of the problem. He doesn't know he is in pain. And so long as he can get foam on his beer and frosting on his donuts and perhaps ketchup on his burgers, he doesn't care. Homer doesn't know he has a soul, let alone that he needs to wake it up. He is mindlessness personified in a cartoon character. And Homer does not know he has much of an innate power to create something new. So, here we come to neurochemistry. We'll come back to Homer and his pea brain in just a minute. In 1995, many of us at a national conference in Chicago listened intently to the neuroscientist David Cummins, who was speaking about a certain allele or receptor site that was missing or fewer in number in the brain tissue of gamblers. He did not know why, and he probably doesn't at this point. He did like the 5-part system that I had for describing addictive behavior that we were both studying, although we were both on certainly different levels. He talked about the role of serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine, GABA, all of which are important. GABA regulates impulse control, but gambling is no longer an impulse control disorder, of course, right? The white-coated specialists decided it's called an addiction now. My goodness. And so if I don't have enough serotonin, I'm not slowed down. And if I've got too much norepinephrine, I'm sped up. But if I've got enough dopamine, I don't really care that I'm sped up or slowed down. The role of receptor sites are all very important as well. Pharmacological inventions and interventions and the magic bullet are all important, but we need more research. And once we do find a magic bullet, then we have to deal with the compliance of addicts. Helpful? Yes. I love Mark Potenza's work. I'm not knocking it at all. But all of this and all of CBT smacks of the analysis and the control paradigm. I'd like to share this slide. Despite my limited understanding of neurochemistry, my clients help me identify the 5 things on the left. All addictions have these things in common. Just ask any addict about negative consequences. They'll be glad to tell you. Some of them will even talk about number 2, which is basically from Dewey Jacobs. We either have a trance or we fall into a depersonalized state, act as if we're the big shot, or we have an out-of-body experience, or we have a blackout. And if you don't know about those 4 dissociative type reactions and you don't use the screens to talk to your clients about those dissociative type reactions, how can you talk to them about the positive dissociation that comes with recovery? Altered brainwaves we've known about since, maybe the 50s and 60s, Dr. David Ohms here in St. Louis popularized the P300 wave, which seems to be in the minds of addicts when exposed to a trigger and not in the mind of people who are not. And then there's altered neurochemistry, which we just talked about. And lastly, there are the residual substances in brain tissue, which we can argue about. The slide on the left, slide on the right, it's estimated that 5 to 10% of the internet users are addicted. I certainly, I don't know where that comes from. I do believe the next statement, 1/3 of the people consider the internet as important as food, water, and shelter. I'll go along with that. But on the right-hand side, wow, I have shrinking portions of my brain because I'm on the internet too much. By the way, I cannot find the source for this meme that's going around. And it's a very popular meme. So let me just mention Ann Wilson and Schaaf's work here about moving beyond the control paradigm and restructuring. Gambling, according to the Yellow Book, is based in immaturity and insecurity and living in a fantasy world. On page 10 of the Yellow Book, it is said that subconsciously gamblers gamble because they felt that they could avoid mature responsibility by wagering on a turn of a wheel or turn of a card. Wow. We need to change things. It goes beyond cognitive and feeling work. It is a letting go of painful patterns, letting go of trauma in order to survive. We have to do the work, not just feel it. And we have to have a deep, ongoing spiritual commitment to happiness. This, Wilson Chafe says, is a move like all spirituality toward wholeness. And that leads me to my first effort at trying to finish in golly. I thought I had to leave at 6:30. I'm sorry. I have a whole nother half an hour. I'm not done yet, so don't leave, okay? Don't leave. If you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we will get them at the end. The process work that I recommend is something that, this isn't a theory, this is something that I do with my clients. And the old analysis, cognitive behavioral therapy paradigm feeds disembodied thinking, and it prevents soul level healing. In the last 20 years, I've devoted myself to wellness. Symptoms appear when participation in life stops for the addict, and counseling becomes a fix or an adjustment. But under a new paradigm of process, deep process work, this is a dynamic, ever-changing, never-gets-done work. It is a process of recovery, and it informs what recovery is. It is a return to self, and we get the addict to participate in life again. And this is in the PDF of resources that you can get from the New York Council on Problem Gambling. And most of you do this with your clients anyways. I'm just suggesting do more of it, because I think it is a way to avoid re-traumatizing people. And we certainly can re-traumatize folks when they journal about their trauma, when they share their story, when they write about it, when they act it out. I like family sculpting. I like working with pillows. But journaling is the piece that can happen on a daily basis. I don't need to be there. The client and the pencil or pen, I like markers that are different colors. We can get a new connection with ourselves and with other people. Stephanie Covington writes in a woman's journal that healing involves discovering our true selves. I assume she means that for men too, but it's in a woman's journal. It also goes on to say that, or she goes on to say that we can connect in healthy relationships with other people. We can understand our sexuality, which is a hugely undertreated portion of gambling treatment. And we can gain some spiritual connections, which is rarely, if ever, mentioned in gambling treatment. I suggest that everyone gets a spiral-bound notebook, 99 cents at Target or any other great department store. And start writing. I tell them to take notes. They don't take notes. So I give them assignments. And this leads to some self-understanding and self-knowledge. But it leads in the end encouragement by other people that they might share their journal with. And once they make that mistake, I correct it and I say, don't share your journal with anyone. You might not even have to share it with me. This is for you to learn for the rest of your life. Keep track of stuff that bothers you. Keep track of amends you need to make. Keep track of how you got here. Get real about it. We can talk about passion in a journal. And we don't have to act on those passionate feelings or the anger that might be a passionate feeling as well. Or in some cases of my clients recently, both suicidal and homicidal tendencies. of just wanting to kill the X, or wanting to take, unfortunately, um, one's own life. Journaling is a wonderful piece, cheap and easy to do. The next one's a little bit harder. And I know, Dawn, you're out there. Thank you very much for saying hello. I saw you in the presentation earlier. Dawn knows that I've been a poet most of my life, been writing poetry for 60 years. I think that makes me old. I'm not sure. But I teach this to my clients. I don't call it poetry writing. I've done several groups over the last 20 years, and I've done this with controls as well. And so my very, very small n shows me, my conclude from this, that this works. And if I don't do it, the outcomes are less favorable when it comes to abstinence, engaging in recovery, and finding happiness. That transformational piece that is so missing so often in treatment, that's cookie cutter or protocol or out of a manual even. You know, Homer didn't know that he had a problem. But what happens in a lot of my Homerish, uncreative souls that I deal with is they don't know that they're creative either. And so I teach them how to be creative. And we draw and we do pictures and do the typical stuff that you learn in counselor training 101. But I ask them to write a sentence that contains 17 syllables based on the old Japanese classic form of haiku of 5, 7, and 5. Actually, that was 5, 0, and 5, but you get the idea. 17 syllables. This is important. It's important that it's 15 to 18 syllables because most mantras, most sacred mantras, are between 15 and 18 syllables. And Allen Ginsberg, the beat poet, who wrote in his manifesto, Howl, his 17 syllable sentence, which has become to be known the American sentence. And that's also something you can Google and find out a lot of information on. The Om, Om Padme Om, is also a 17 syllable chant. Many, many chants are 17 syllables. The resulting gems are kernels of wisdom directly from their own creativity. And although it says 15 on the left-hand side, I've removed number 2 and number 10 just to make it a little bit bigger, and because these are much better. But this is what comes up in a 90-minute meeting. Okay, we're going to write 17 syllables. And I give them a sheet of paper with 17 blocks, and they fill them in. Sometimes I have to tell them what syllables are, too. But you're talking to somebody who did step work with homeless people in South America who didn't speak English. So this is nothing new. Wow. How about number 12? Blank, empty, loss of vision, cracked shutters, show no light, hit my bottom. And then number 15 warms my heart. Little by little, I am a work in progress. Positive changes. This works. This is a personally derived mantra that they can use. Number 8's a little bizarre. Sun sending warmth, energy, relaxed, calm, permeates my zip code. Golly, zip code threw me off there. From there, I often teach them to move into some haiku, and then eventually into haibun, which is a travel, a record of a journey. And it's a travel log, if you will, in prose, a couple of paragraphs of what you did today, what you saw, things like that, followed by a haiku. And it's a traditional form, once again, Asian. We can use journaling as a source, but also as a record of growth. In approximately 60% of all my clients find a way out of trauma using this. About 20% of my clients, these are round figures too, 20% of my clients, maybe 2 out of 10, will admit to trauma upon intake, and about 60% of them will admit to it when we get through with this particular exercise. The next exercise is writing a narrative, not poetry, writing sentences and paragraphs. And most of us know that an inpatient assignment might be writing the story of your addiction. How did you get here? Where did it start? When did you take your first drink? When did you make your first bet? That's boring. Everybody does that. It's like, okay, I came, I gambled, I lost, I'm here now, help me. And I say, let's help yourself, okay? We need to define the noise of addiction. Yes, that's what we're talking about, and how the addiction was born. But we also need to look at the noise in recovery. Do they have some of the environmental benefits that we just talked about in the last session? Do they have ability? Do they have insurmountable debts? What is the noise of recovery? Is the wife ready to leave, or has the husband already left? I make it a little clear for them. I give them weekly assignments. Some of them do this, some of them don't. I find the older the client does not do them, the younger the client eats this stuff up. And the other thing that it does is it gives them something to do in between sessions, and they don't have to bet. So that's a benefit, I suppose. I ask them, write in your journal about the last GA meeting that you went to. What made an impression on you? Now, don't break anonymity or say who was there, but what's the context and what did you get? What was the kernel of wisdom? My AA sponsor many years ago said that I should take my big book of Alcoholics Anonymous to every meeting, and there are blank pages in the back of that book, and I should write down a couple of words, not a sentence even, but a couple of words that I could leave that meeting with. Sometimes the word was tolerance for ignorant people or patience for the dull. But I still learned things, and I didn't drink during the time of that meeting. Or on another front with money. What was your first job and what did you use the money for? Not just what's the meaning of money, but where did it start? How did we get here? And what do you want to change about that? So I call it selective detailing. Look at the content, the context, preserve anonymity. Don't tell me that you went to a meeting. Tell me what stood out. What nugget did you take home? Now, we can do this for sex and relationship histories as well. It's a little bit hazardous. But I tell you, they would much rather talk about their sex life than they will talk about their financial life. That is a verboten subject. My checkbook is close to my heart. It's all in round figures, and most of us who have worked with gamblers for more than a day know that whatever they say their debt is, you can double or triple or quadruple it. But writing this stuff down can also re-traumatize them. So working with a journal, doing poetry in the class, and then working on the fine points of the narrative has to be getting to the facts, and then examining the perceptions or misperceptions and putting them in the past. Which leads me to this. Some of you know that I teach cross-cultural drumming, shamanic drumming, and I don't do that very often anymore. And I started off doing this when I was very young, and I did not take a weekend workshop or read a book on it, but I grew up with this. I grew up in in the land of the Seneca, and I live now in the land of the Kickapoo and the Osage and the Ozark foothills. And drumming is very important as a way to access non-ordinary reality where one can find answers and solve trauma. And we can change from negative dissociative-like reactions of the addiction to a positive dissociative-like state that is helpful in recovery. I would do this only with sufficient training, but this is cross-cultural, and it's really hard to miss. I first started using shamanic drumming in individual sessions, doing the LCSW's sanitized version of soul retrieval because I couldn't call it that, nor could I get reimbursed for it. It did not have the risk of re-traumatizing the client because it draws strength from sources beyond the client and beyond the clinician, just beyond. It may sound a little woo-woo to you, but experience its healing power once and you'll be convinced. Sandra Ingerman's book, Soul Retrieval, subtitled Mending the Fragmented Self, is the primer on this. But I do not suggest that reading that book, or a book like it, or attending a weekend workshop is sufficient preparation for doing this. But you can get a drumming tape online very easily and benefit with your clients of going on a journey with them. Why? Because in 20 to 45 seconds of sonic, repetitive, driving rhythm of the drum can change waking alpha brainwaves of an alert state to deep theta relaxation in about 80% of the people who listen to that drum. It happens without anybody's permission. It just does it. My clients love it. They love listening to me do drumming. It also can be done with a rattle as well. In this relaxed, receptive state, answers come, perspectives change, trauma gets healed. There's nothing the clinician or the client does. Energy and spirits well beyond us assist in recovery. I want to repeat, this change in brainwave is a change from negative dissociative-like states abundant in addiction to the positive dissociative-like state of recovery. To summarize my 30 years of doing this work as a clinician, and to use Jacob's terminology. Let's not confuse that with journey work, which is just another piece of this. It takes it a little bit further. It's not the action of the rattle or the drum or even clicking stones together or tapping, as was mentioned earlier. It's not these actions, but it's the brain's response that changes things. Journeying with intent. I want to find out why my parents were the way they were. I want to find out why my wife left me. I want to find out who can help me. Journeying with intent, with a purpose, involves changing brain waves and becoming receptive to healing information from non-ordinary reality. Checking on time here. I don't want to run out. Mircea Eliade in his classic on shamanism, Archaic Techniques of Ecstasy, that came out in 1951, the year I was born, by the way. It came out in French, so I couldn't have read it anyways. He says that a drum becomes animated and alive with the spirits of the animal hide covering the wood frame, the wood often hand-selected after being struck by lightning, and comprising the drum and the bearers or makers or the drummer's own blood and spirits, often using alcohol to sprinkle on the instrument once constructed. Spirits, how about that? The result is traveling into realities only glimpsed by others in dreams and visions. The shaman protects life, health, fertility, light, against death, disease, sterility, and darkness. And this was written quite some time ago. Again, this is not for the uninitiated nor the weekend armchair expert, but Jeanette Gagin, in her wonderful book, Journey, integrates psychiatry and journey work in a contemporary setting. It is, I believe, more helpful than hours on the couch, any sort of talk therapy, dialectical therapy, any kind of therapy, except perhaps Jungian analysis, which, if we could afford, everyone should undergo. So the last piece before I get to the big one is rocks. Clicking rocks together. Any sort of sonic driving rhythm. And it's okay to make mistakes. But I want to talk about rocks because there's a story that I like to tell about a heroin addict who was in my office one day, and I always have a bunch of rocks around. It's good for my ADD, ADHD clients as well. I have a few toys here and there. But they have rocks, and they pick them up, and they, sometimes they walk off with them. And this one heroin addict selected a small chunk of red granite, about the size of an egg, sort of rough. And I asked her, why do you like that rock? And she said, well, I think if I can crush this rock, I will go back and use again. And she never did. And she never went back to using. But one Sunday morning, she called me on my cell phone. And she says, Dan, I've lost my rock. She was frantic that she lost her rock. That was on Sunday. Monday morning, when the office opened at 9 o'clock, she had driven 2 hours to come and pick up another rock. I do not question these methods. The results simply speak loudly enough. Remember that gamblers often live with superstitions, their own little systems, and an unusual sense of cause and effect. So this stuff, they really, really eat up. Now the next slide, if I'm lucky, is this one. Just breathe. And when we invite the bell, we take a breath, maybe 2 or 3 breaths. And the bell is a sound that can be heard on a telephone, a classroom bell, a chiming of a clock, or you can get a bell like this, and you can learn to invite the bell, because the bell is our friend. We invite it as if it were a friend. And when we hear the bell, we can come back to our true home, our true sense of self, in this saggy-baggy earth suit that we inhabit. Well, that's my description of my earth suit. And a little bit of a guided meditation may help us here. Each time you hear a bell, stop whatever you're doing, be quiet, follow your breath in, follow your breath out. Know that you're alive, that you can change things, that recovery is possible. Breathing in, I know that I am breathing in. Breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. And this goes on. Breathing in, I notice my breath going deeper. Breathing out, I notice my breath growing closer. In, out, deep, slow. There are variations of this. These 4 that I have here, ending up with smiling and releasing tension, are the first 4 establishments, are the first 4 breathing exercises given to us by the Buddha some thousands of years ago in a sutra called the 4 Establishments of Mindfulness, the Sutra on the Full Awareness of Breathing. I wish we had time to go further into this. We have about 10 minutes left, and I have 85,000 slides to do. So, in your resource packet, contemplative psychotherapy for me means that recovery is more than abstinence. Most of you know, if you've heard me speak before, that Terry Gorski gave us in 1989 6 deepening levels of recovery: abstinence, situational change, behavioral change, cognitive change, emotional change, and core belief change, in that particular order. First of all, we stop the craziness. Secondly, we don't go around our setups. Thirdly, we engage in recovery behaviors, capital B behaviors, things like honesty, unselfishness, purity of motives, love, courage, patience, tolerance, humility. These are the attitudes and principles that underlie the foundation of the 12 steps. Sure, stopping gambling is a behavioral change. Sure, not going to the casino is a behavioral change. But these are big behaviors and they take time. After that comes cognitive change. That is a mistake that a lot of CBT therapists who are new in the field make with addicts. You can't change the thinking without changing the behavior first. Just simply doesn't work. Emotional change happens years down the road, but it might start at the very beginning, like core belief change, a word that we borrow from Patrick Carnes on process addictions, talks about changing the beliefs that we hold dear, that all women are like this, that all men are like this, that all black people are like this, that all people from Western New York State are like that. I don't know. Do I look like I'm from St. Louis or Olean, New York, where I was born? I'm not quite sure. The second thing that Terry Gorski gave us, and he stole it from Karen Kellogg and a few other people, Virginia Sater, Helen Wigscheider Cruz, and a lot of people talk about phases of recovery over time. This is not new with me. Let me show you the chart on the next page. It's a little hard to read the fine print, but once again, it is in your resource packet. There's this version that says client version, and you'll see that down the left are the deepening levels of change, and from left to right are the phases of recovery over time, which go out to 5 to 8 years and 8 to 11 years. In Gorski's original work, only studied 11 years, but my guess is that maintenance recovery goes on. It's been gone on in my life for 38 years. You'll see that most of the work of recovery at the front end are at the earliest levels of recovery, dealing with abstinence, and the far right bottom of this chart deals with the deeper issues that if we bring up too quickly, the person might relapse. If we don't heal the trauma, the person might relapse. The person might relapse anyways. Addiction, like depression, is a disease that tends toward relapse. We have to do everything that we can. And that means more than go to treatment, more than go to meetings, more than get a sponsor, more than working the steps. We need to work toward wellness. So there's another version of this chart in the PDF, and it is for counselors, and it's a lot more detail. I invite you to please give me a call if you want to use this with your clients. You certainly can. It's in the public domain. Everything that I do is it can be used. Please cite the source. Let me just in summary say that abstinence leads to recovery, leads to transformation. Remaining free from addictive behaviors and cross-addictive behaviors can help us open the door to recovery, which means I have to remain out of action and abstinent. And the ultimate goal is transformation. This particular slide, active addiction is on your left. Sustained remission, notice the medical terminology, is on your right. I use a whiteboard. I suggest everybody who's working with clients use a whiteboard. Draw a line. That's my best visual. One line with a couple of hash marks. When I'm actively gambling, I'm in action. But when I stop gambling, I'm still in action if I'm reading the racing forums and I'm reading the lottery results. Uh, yeah, I'm still in action. And then there comes that time, if I'm lucky enough to continue to abstain, that I become out of action. And that's spiritual bankruptcy. I have no purpose and no meaning outside of my addiction. Many people would say that recovery begins at that point when we get into action. Notice the quotation marks around that. If we're lucky enough to continue our abstinence, we can enter recovery at that point. Into action, of course, refers to a chapter in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it talks about working the program. Whatever that means, that's a whole nother hour that we have to go into. Another way of looking at this in the transformational state is that I'm actively addicted on the left and I'm still in action. I'm abstinent and in action. And then I go more and more towards the right and I get into action. That is going from being totally lost in recovery, baffled by the noise of recovery, as well as the noise of addiction, to finding some stability, but still having a difficult time because I'm in action. And then dropping off into the abyss that Andre Nouwen talks about, that somehow we have to find a way around the abyss. Because if we keep walking down the same road, as Lucia Portia says, we're going to fall into the same pothole again and again and again. And we have to move to being spiritually fit. So, what does that mean? We need to accept things as they are. We need to practice deep listening. We need to sit with it, whatever's going on. We didn't get here overnight. Recovery's not going to happen overnight. Be yourself. Everyone else is taken. You got to be yourself. And when you recover, don't embrace any instability in you and other people. Accept it. They are who they are. We are who we are. If you don't like being unstable, change it. Don't accept any non-peace. Don't accept non-freedom. There was something profound I wanted to say, and I'm not really sure what that might be. But I'll close with this. Recovery rails against the control paradigm of addiction by giving us a life full of meaning and purpose. We have to do some planning, but we don't have to be attached to the outcome. We have to be courageous, but we have to live a humble lifestyle. Live simply so other people can simply live. We have to practice love and compassion as practices, just like my meditation practice of 37 years. Absolutely important. Yeah, it's a practice I have to keep up with. And I have to practice love and compassion with appropriate boundaries. There has to be a mindful commitment to being present, and we have to find a life-sustaining spiritual path to reconnect with our source. So, I have 2 minutes. My goodness, I finished, Leonie. That's wonderful. Um, this presentation is in memory of Joanna Franklin and Reese Middleton and Ed Looney and Mike Brubaker. And there are some other credits there. Any thoughts of mine? Um, you can take a look at my website at heal.me/Daniel Smith. What I've been working on for years now is wellness and happiness. You can reach me by my cell phone, or you can reach me through Hope Medical Center in Las Vegas. But email and cell phone all the time. Any questions that you see in the chat that you would like to bring up?
There were no questions in the chat, but there was just one question but you presented it. They just wanted your email address, and I believe they got that. So I do want to thank everyone, especially Daniel. This was awesome. This was a beautiful and well-presented and awesome information workshop presentation. And I thank you all for being here and still sticking with us. And we just hope that you continue with the next presentation, which will be on peer-based recovery meetings. So that will start promptly at 8:15. And thank you for joining us for today and continue to join us. We appreciate your support and advocacy. So be blessed. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
All right, signing
Thank you,
off.
Daniel.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
And thanks again, Leilani. Thank you
Welcome.
to the whole team. We'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Are you all set?